everybody, it's Jennifer Zimmerman. I wanted to stop by and say hello to all of you. You are my purchasers, and that's why you are here, because you bought this book, The Secrets of Coloring 2. And as promised, I have a tutorial on video for you today. Before I get into the tutorial itself, I just wanted to take a moment to say thank you so much to you. It is because of you that I'm able to make books like this. Thank you for purchasing the book. For any of you that may have taken a second out of your day to send me a message to tell me how much it's helped you so far. For anyone who's taken a moment to go onto Amazon or Goodreads and leave a review, I so appreciate every moment you take to do something like that, because your feedback is what makes or breaks a book. And for an independent artist who is doing everything on her own, that really means a lot. So thank you. Anyway, I wanted to get into this tutorial, and it will be on video for you following this little message. Before I do, I would just like to tell you a couple of things. First of all, it is this particular image that we're talking about, which I call my theatrical portrait. It's got two light sources. My goal of creating a tutorial like this in the book is simply to teach you how to create a vibrant portrait, okay? I am not as concerned about teaching you the details of the face, the things that you will find in some of my other portrait tutorials. However, in this video tutorial, I will cover such things as how I went about creating the eyes, and I will show you how I created the hair, and I will also show you how I created the crystals that she's holding in her hand and the ones that are on her shoulder, so that you can see the actual technique of making something look like it glows. And that is my goal for you for this particular tutorial. I am not going to cover the entire tutorial from her tiara down to her uniform, because it would take so much time and the video itself would be so lengthy. So what I will do, if you are interested, is I will, if you want to leave a comment in the comment section for the purchasers on ModernColoring.com, if you want to leave a comment, if it's something you're interested in watching, a live tutorial on how to do the gems or the tiara or her uniform or something like that, please let me know what you're most interested in, and I will try to make another video for that. Or I will do it live, actually, I think. I would also want to tell you one more thing, and that is that if you have the means to do it, I will always recommend, number one, if you want to, practice in your book to see how this technique works. But if you have access to getting the Canson paper that I have recommended, okay, I would suggest that you download the downloadable PDF version of the file and print it onto that paper if you are trying to get the exact same effects that I am showing you here, because the one that I did is on that paper. If you do choose to do your work in the book, you will get a similar effect, but your colors won't be quite as vibrant because there's not as much tooth in the paper. And unfortunately, I have no way of putting Canson paper in these books. I wish I could. Anyway, again, I just wanted to say thank you so much. Take your time, watch this video, pause it if you need to, if you're going to color along, pull up a seat, get comfy for about a half an hour, and make sure you have all of the Prismacolors that you are going to need. So have a great time, and I am so looking forward to seeing these posted on Facebook. Thanks again, you guys. This is a fun portrait to do because we're using a really dark, rich colored paper. I've chosen my Tientis paper, which is made by Canson. It is a slightly textured paper, and I'm using the less textured side. There are two sides. I don't want to use too much texture because then the tooth will show through the paper, and it does take a little time to work over this drawing in the end with the colorless blender to get it somewhat smooth, but I do like the fact that the texture does grab my pencil, and I really like using waxy pencils as opposed to less opaque, more oily pencils with this paper, just because it sort of sits on the surface and the intensity of those colors is emphasized. This is a really neat portrait to do because we're actually using two different light sources. On the far side, she's being lit by a blue light, which is actually in the form of crystal that she is holding. And then on the closest side, she's being lit by a pink crystal light. So what happens is in the center where these two different light sources meet, we will have a really dark core shadow, and that core shadow I've created in this drawing using the dark of the paper itself and mixing it in with a little bit of Prismacolor violet blue pencil, and that sort of creates drama in the transition itself. For the next 5 minutes or so, you will want to follow along the directions in your book and watch as I color to see the motions and to see how much of each color I am applying. But I won't be talking to you until about the 10-minute mark. So now I start going back through the non-photo blue, the Deco Pink and the lilac just to kind of go around and smooth everything out a little bit, cool everything off a little bit, and begin to plug up that tooth to get rid of the texture in the paper, because right now there's a bit too much. So now I'm going to begin adding my darkest darks, which I will be doing with Prismacolor 933 Violet Blue. And as you can see, I am deepening that core shadow I talked about at the beginning of the video, where the two sides, the two different colors of light meet. And I'm darkening those just a little bit because the paper itself is fairly dark, but just to give it a cooler cast, I'm adding a little bit under her chin, I'm adding a little bit on her neck, especially on her neck, and I'm adding more underneath her lips, in the creases of her eyelids where you would see shadow, wherever light would not hit directly. Don't forget to add a little bit on the far side of the face, the cheek, because we want to show that that cheek is three-dimensional, that it's got form to it, so it's turning slightly, and we can indicate that by having a core shadow and then the blue reflected light at the very, very end. So here you can see that I'm using 903, which is true blue, and I've chosen this color because it's kind of a middle color, like an intermediate color. So what it's actually doing for me is it's tying both sides of her face together, the two sides of light together. It's kind of marrying them, if you will. I like using this color because it's a vibrant color, yet it's not too overpowering. And I'm able to use this to also look like eyeshadow or eye makeup and make her eyes stand out a bit because it is saturated or vibrant enough. And I'm adding a bit to the neck and down to her clavicle area so that I'm smoothing out the pencil below into the tooth of the paper. Now I'm going to do just a few touch-ups with my non-photo blue and my lilac again. I have to kind of work back and forth a little bit at a time so that I can see, you know, the subtleties of the turns in her face. And I want to make sure that I'm adding the right amount of color on both sides so it really looks like the light is coming from one of those light sources. So I have to remember to keep the warmer colors on her left side and some of the cooler colors on her right side. And I'm going back into all these pencils just to touch everything up and really tighten it up and try to get rid of some of that tooth. I love using this paper because it will accept a ton of pencil, but the downside is you really do have to use pretty sharp pencils to be able to get into that tooth and plug it up enough. There are smoother papers available made by the same company, but for me personally, I find that these work a little bit better because I can get the amount of pencil down that I really want to. So you can see that I'm using the lilac again to kind of smooth things out, to go back into the places that I've used it before, or just to really kind of smooth those transitions in between the places. I'm adding a little touch of pink here just to warm up the tip of her nose so it stands out a little bit more. And now I'm going to darken just the details. If you look at her lips, When you use a pencil like a dark pencil like this color here, we want to make sure that we don't overdo it. So I would suggest that you keep a really sharp pencil, a really, really razor sharp tip. That will help when you're trying to achieve the lip lines and things like that. I'm going back and forth between the non-photo blue and the violet blue here just to add some of those little details and give it texture using curved motions. So let's just take a quick moment to talk about how I created her eyes, because you won't actually see me doing this in the video. For the whites of her eyes, I actually just left the paper, the blue that it is, and then I used a little bit of my luminance white pencil to create the reflections on the right side of each eye. I then, for the iris or colored part of the eye, used a little bit of non-photo blue. It kind of lines up with that reflection that was done in white. And then for her reflected light bits that you'll see kind of reflecting from the left side of her, you see a little pink fleck, and that was done using some neon gel pens, just a tiny little bit. Finally, I'm using a bit of white gel pen to do both the highlight that sits right in the above her pupil and the very tips of her eyelashes, and it really sets it off. If you want, you can use some of the gel pens, both the neon and the white, to sort of pump up her brow bone just below her eyebrow and the top of her cheekbone as well. So you can see here I'm using this white gel pen now to hit the very ends of her eyelashes, and I will use a colorless blender just to sort of smooth out her brow bone for a second before I use a few little stippled dots of the white gel pen on her brow bone to make it look like it glistens a little bit. I am also going to use a little bit of a black Verithin on the inside of her mouth just to define where her teeth go, as well as my non-photo blue pencil just to make little highlights pop inside of there. So I'm using my Prismacolor 933 blue once more. I am actually darkening the part of her hand that is furthest away from the glowing blue crystal that she'll be holding. I know it's a little bit kind of abstract to think about it, but that's kind of how you have to think about it, because the inside of her hand would be lighter since the crystal is being held in it. So now I'm going to begin to tackle the crystal itself, and you can see I'm using 133 to fill in the actual crystal itself, and a little slightly lighter color as well to kind of blend the two towards the middle of each part that makes up the shape of the crystal. Then I'm going to use some lighter colors on the outside edges because we want this to look like it's glowing, and this is how you make something look like it is glowing. So I'm using the pencils, a sharp pencil, to make sure that I'm going all the way up against the edges, and then I'm going over those already drawn lines with a little bit of white, and I'm using my white luminance pencil here, as you can see. Now I'm going to use my colorless blender to kind of get rid of some of the scratchiness and grain, and I'm going to go over the very ends a little bit more with a 992 pencil just for brightness. And I am using a very thin white. You could probably use any hard white pencil to just make those edges of the shapes pop out a little bit more. And I'm using some darkness surrounding immediately the shape to make it glow a little bit more, and then one layer of light around that darkness, and that's really how we get that glowing effect there. So to finish off that glow, I'm just going to add a little bit of that 956 lilac over the white, and it really kind of makes it look complete. Then I will move on to the pink crystals that you see on her shoulder, which are different in color from the big blue crystal that she's holding. However, they're treated the same way, and to make this crystal, I need an array of colors. I'm going to start right now with my Parma Violet, and again I'm filling in the centers of each of the crystals with a slightly darker color, the Parma Violet, and the edges I'm going to hit with this neon pink color, and that's how I'm going to get that glow started. So for each of the crystals, I'm doing that. Now, I am going to want to vary these crystals a little bit so that one stands out more than the other. So you'll see that I handle each one a slightly different way. I am using on this particular crystal a little bit of the luminance white. Again, a sharp pencil is really important. And on the edges of that particular crystal, I've added a little bit of neon orange. And now I'm tackling some more crystals. I'm using the Verithin white here to make those edges really sharp. You can also use another hard white pencil, and it may benefit you to use your colorless blender too, even though you don't see me using it here. Now I'm moving on to the hair. I'm going to start by using a marker to fill in some basic colors, some basic shapes that I'm going to eventually add colored pencil on top of. I would recommend that you use sort of a deep tone marker like a Copic B23 or 70 Ardix. This way you are putting down a base coat to create the shadows of where the light would not be hitting the hair directly. And in between, the paper that is still showing is going to be where the highlights and lighter tones will eventually go. The marker I'm actually using is a Touch New marker. However, any of those markers mentioned before will work, and you can see that because I am using a non-brush tip marker, I am using the finer point side. If I did have a brush tip marker, I would only use that side. I would not use the chisel tip, and it does have a tendency to make things a little bit easier, but either will work. Now I'm going to go in and I'm going to use a method that my friend Maria taught me about, which is to, on toned paper, use a white luminance pencil over the black line art of hair. And the reason that we do this is so that we get this sort of seamless, beautiful, shining hair without lines breaking up those areas. So it just has a more natural look, and a lot of dark lines surrounding an object will flatten it. So this is one way that we can actually make it more three-dimensional. So I'm really carefully going over each of these lines with a sharpened luminance white pencil, making sure that I cover each one. And now I'm going to begin with my mid-tone colors. I'm sort of carving out areas that will be somewhere in the middle, stemming from the darkest shadows. And to do that, I want to use some fine lines with my pencil, some fine point lines coming from those marker areas with the slightly lighter color. And then I'm going to go over some of those areas, and I'm going to start building up where the shadow would meet those lighter areas by kind of connecting it with this darker blue color pencil. So you'll see right now it kind of looks patchy, but eventually, once I've got enough layers on here, you'll see how it kind of begins to look seamless after a while. It is a process though, and don't get frustrated because you will need quite a few layers and you will need to work back and forth. I'm going into my lightest pencil now again, which is the non-photo blue, to hit the areas that are going to be just next to the hottest highlights, the whitest highlights. And the whitest highlights will actually have white in them. But these are the next two lightest areas. Keep a sharp pencil. I'm adding more definition to the areas that will be with the brightest highlights on the bend of her hair where it curves towards us. So you can see I'm kind of holding my pencil more vertically, and I'm making sure it's really sharp so I can get in there and draw some little curved lines right along that bend. And that's what's going to make it pop out towards us. Now you can see it's starting to come together. You see some areas of light and areas of dark, and they're broken up with some thinner strands or thinner lines in between. And I'm using a variety of about 4 different colors here to try to build up that hair. The base marker really does help to create the base that I'm going to basically use as a shadow. Again, back with my luminance. And now I'm really beginning to build up a few of these highlights right along that area that's going to protrude the most. Again, working back and forth with the different colors of pencils. Keep your pencils sharp. And here is a little tip for you. When you are creating highlights in hair, you want to make sure that from a vertical standpoint on your hair, you want to make sure that those highlights are kind of all aligning. So you can see that bump where it's really protruding is going to be the brightest area, and those highlights are all across that whole thing going to line up and sort of be along the same plane. I don't know how else to put it. And then the shadows are going to sort of do the same. So the shadows by underneath her crown all line up sort of against the crown itself too. So the colors should kind of align to make it have that sort of glossy effect. And now I'm tying it all together by adding some darks in between. with my darker colors. And I will hit the hottest highlights now with my white. And you'll see it really does begin to come forward towards us. And this is why it's so important to use mixed media, because it spares your hands, it spares your pencils. I'm only using one luminance pencil here. I adore luminance pencils, but they're very expensive, and using an inexpensive alcohol marker has helped me put this base down quickly and easily. I'm going to go a few more rounds with these pencils that I've been using to just get some little marks and smooth things out, make things look a little more even, try to get the transitions to flow a little bit better. You can see it's softening it a bit. And it's really truly a back and forth with these colors and using your eye to determine where you need more of something. Anyway, I hope that you've enjoyed this video and that it's helped you a little bit to decipher what you need to do that you couldn't decipher from the book itself. This is a complex tutorial, but not impossible. So give it a shot. Let me know what you think, and I hope that you've had fun coloring this with me. Bye-bye.